everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about everything I read in May. It's a little bit delayed. I feel like I haven't read anything lately, but apparently I have. If you think that I wear the same shirt all the time, you would be absolutely right because I love this shirt and I wear it at least twice a week. And today I just had to do a video finally because I actually did my makeup, although I went and cut some fresh onions and wow, I literally cried all my mascara off. But anyways, we're here. I have a couple minutes. We are going to get this video done and talk about what I have read. So without further ado, in the month of May, I read about 2,000 pages and I finished 8 books. So not altogether terrible, although I feel like I haven't finished anything recently. I certainly haven't written any reviews on Goodreads. I've done pretty terrible last month, so hopefully this month will be a little bit better. The first book that I read was Fallout by Steve Shinkin. If you saw my last video, I read Bomb, which talked about the atomic bomb. I actually ended up buying it from Half Price Books so that I could have a physical copy because I loved it so much. So I read Fallout, which has to do with the Cold War and everything that was going on between the USSR and America and the talks that they were having back and forth. I loved this one even more than Bomb, if that was possible, because this one just showed so much that I had no idea about in the Cold War, and just the emotions and the really tough decisions that the presidents had to make throughout the Cold War. And especially whenever Kennedy became president, everyone remembers him as this great president, but really like how close it came to like World War III while he was a president and how scary that would have been for him to have just been elected. If you like anything about like post-World War II history, you want to know about presidents, this was such a well-written book. There was some language in here, just a little bit. I think in all of his books, Steve Shankin's books that I've read, they've all had just a couple of bad words in there, but other than that, they've been very clean and just really informative for kind of modern history. So I really liked that book. And then the next one that I read was actually a family read aloud. It was something you wouldn't expect to be a family read aloud, and it ended up being surprisingly so good. It was The Untold Secrets of Planet Earth, Dire Dragons by Vance Nelson. And I thought I had already done a video on this, but apparently I haven't. This basically goes through how dinosaurs and humans had to have lived together. Dinosaurs, dragons, same things, but proving that the evolutionary theory that dinosaurs lived so much before humans and they never lived together, that's completely false. And he goes through every country in the world and how they have these different pictures, drawings that they've done of dinosaurs, that there's no way that these like primitive people would have been able to just imagine this. They wouldn't have been able to dig up all of these fossils that only in the last like 100 years have we had the technology to be able to perfectly preserve them, like all these Native American petroglyphs that you see, all those different things. In China, different countries all have these artworks, sculptures that look exactly like the artist renderings of dragons, dinosaurs that we have today. And he did all these tests where he went to people from like universities and he had them draw picture of what a dinosaur would look like from a certain fossil, and then like looking in a certain way in a certain position, and then they had never seen like the original artwork or sculpture or whatever that he's trying to compare them to, and then he compares the two to see if they were similar or the same, and oftentimes they were like exactly the same. So these people who have lived in the past, they had to have seen the dinosaurs right in front of them because they couldn't have had access to all these fossils and everything. It was a really fascinating book, and even though it's nonfiction, it read in a really interesting way and has a lot of pictures in there. It's a very high quality book for not a bad price, so I would definitely recommend it. I don't often say this in my videos, but check down below for any links to any books that I talk about. I always link all of the books that I talk about, and you can easily find the links below. And then I listened to The Indifferent Stars Above, The Harrowing Saga of a Donner Party Bride by Daniel James Brown. I ended up giving this 3 stars, but honestly, I don't think I liked anything about it. It was very odd and boring to me. There was a whole lot of speculation that the author did. He says in the beginning he specifically chose this one person who there wasn't much history about. She like never kept a journal. Basically, there's nothing known about her, and he wrote this book on her. And it just felt like he was making a lot of stuff up and kind of speculating on what it would have looked like and felt like and all those different things. Also, this is more like a survival story, kind of like the one I read, the Endurance book. I just think I don't like survival stories because it feels like there's no point. Like they get to the end and they've just like everyone's died, only a couple people survived, and they have these horrible things to live with for the rest of their life. I much prefer like a crisis, like Fallout. You know, there was this crisis happening, um, and then they overcame it, and it was fine. But the survival books typically don't have like a happy ending. I don't know. I don't like it, and I kept expecting like some big thing to happen because this book has been talked about so much. Like everyone loves this book, and there were so many people online on the library app to read it, and yet it just, I don't know. I felt like it never actually hit the climax of the story. And I didn't know anything about the Donner Party before. I had no idea what this book was going to be about. So there were a lot of like just amazing things about the hardships that they experienced on the journey, and I was definitely astounded by it. However, like just the cannibalism, that I think is the appeal, I guess, to a lot of people for the Donner Party. No appeal to me at all. It was very disgusting. And also the author just spends a lot of the book putting all these different like diatribes on various like historical, psychological things. Some of them were super interesting. I learned about like how they made butter as they were going along on the wagon trail. I learned about different like the ways that the culture worked back then. There was a lot of interesting things, but also there was a lot of just like completely speculative things that he would go on this long like speech about some psychological effect that they would have experienced. So if you're looking for just like a survival story with really no hope because there's no Christianity in there, and so all these people who have literally been cannibals, most of their family has died. They have nothing left when they get to California, and they have to just go on with life. I mean, like one lady got remarried like 3 or 4 times, and her husband just died in these like crazy different experiences, and it was just so sad. Like they have nothing, they have to deal with these experiences for the rest of their life because they have no hope to look to. So if you like that kind of book, then read this. Otherwise, I would not recommend it, and I personally did not like it. And then the next book I finished, yes, this counts as a book because it has an ISBN and it's on Goodreads, so therefore it's a book. But it's the First and Second Peter LSB Scripture Study Journal. And so when we went through our Bible study at church, we went through First and Second Peter, and it has like the scripture over on one side, and then on the other side you can take notes. There's plenty of room in here to take notes. I really appreciated that. There's lots of room for like intro and outro notes. I really loved using this notebook as we went through First and Second Peter. It made it really easy to keep all my notes in one place, and now I can just store this on my bookshelf and find it later when I want to reference First and Second Peter. Then I finished The Loveliest Place, which I felt like this book took me a long time to read, but I guess I finished it in like a month and a half. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. It's by Dustin Benji, and it's part of the Union series, which I'll do a video ranking all of those because I've read 4 of them, and I believe there's 5. So I'm almost there. This is about the church, the beauty and glory of the church, and how we should love it more. It definitely has a good like premise that we don't appreciate the church more, we don't understand what the purpose of the church is, and there were a lot of good things in here. I have a notebook where I wrote down some quotes in here that I really liked. There was a lot of just great quotes that make you think about, so there's like a chapter on leaders shepherding the flock. It says faithful leaders beautify the church. When leaders within the church admit and demonstrate that they are subservient to Christ, all of their ministries within the church display a rare beauty that shines with the glory of Christ. So a lot of things that just reorient your perspective. Oh, I loved the chapter on worship, and they have a quote from John Owen that said that the church should regularly be finding ways to express worship in manners that are more decent, beautiful, and orderly. So there were a lot of good things in here. However, I only gave it 3 stars for 2 reasons. One, even though this series says that it is written for pastors and then they write like a shorter version for the people of the church, I haven't noticed that being an issue in any of the other books. I've read Deeper, Gentle and Lowly, Rejoice and Tremble, and they all felt like very accessible. This felt like it was written to the leaders of the church just because of certain chapters on the leaders and what their role is, and he was kind of talking more to them. And also, I don't agree with the theological, I don't agree with the hermeneutics he uses in most of the book. The first chapter starts off with Song of Solomon and uses verse 115, behold, you are beautiful, my love, behold, you are beautiful, and writes an entire chapter on how the church is beautiful based off of that verse. I believe that Song of Solomon is literal, and so that really bothered me, and he kind of carries that throughout the book, and then he ends the book on that note using another verse from Song of Solomon. I just felt like it was weird, and just didn't work well, so there's a lot of good things in here, but I think there are a lot of other books that we could read talking about how great the church is and just helping us to appreciate it more. And then I finished Dorothy Sayers' Have His Carcass. If you follow me on Instagram, you saw that I took this with me to my graduation and read it as I was waiting. This was the second, well, okay, so it's confusing. There are, I believe, 10 Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries that she wrote. However, there's like an arc that Dorothy Sayers wrote with Lord Peter and Dorothy Vane. Harriet Vane. So she wrote where they kind of work together. So the first one is Strong Poison, which I believe I reviewed last month. If you want to go look at my video, and I tabbed it up. No, maybe I read it in March. Yeah, I think I finished it in March. So then I decided to read the second one in kind of that story arc, which is actually the 7th one in the Lord Peter Wimsey series. So this one is Harriet Vane actually finds a body, and then Lord Peter Wimsey just happens to show up and help her to solve it. I felt like this was just written in such a good way. It had quotes at the beginning of every chapter that helped you to kind of focus on the right thing in the chapter. And then each chapter is labeled the evidence of blank. So it starts out with the evidence of the corpse, then the evidence of the road, the evidence of the hotel. And there are 34 chapters with different evidence that's revealed in there. And so you're constantly trying to like put it together in your mind and figure out, what am I supposed to do with all this evidence? But you definitely are left guessing for most of the book. And I thought it was one of the better like mystery books that I've read that you didn't see the ending coming at all, and it all just worked out perfectly, and all the evidence that was presented to you wasn't far-fetched, but yet it wasn't predictable. It was just written really well. I like it. I ended up giving that one 4 stars, and if you are into mystery books, I would definitely recommend reading Strong Poison first and then reading Have His Carcass, and I do like Have His Carcass a lot better. Then I listened to Before I Called You Mine by Nicole Deese. This is for the Busy Moms Read To book club that I'm a part of. I've enjoyed some of the books that I've read. This one I ended up giving 3 stars, but it honestly wasn't a bad book. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. So the story is that it's a single woman, and she's trying to adopt a child. Now, that is a very controversial topic to write on. But whenever she is in the process of adopting, she meets this guy who's literally the most perfect guy ever, sees her for the first time, asks her on a date. I mean, like, literally everything you could ask for in a guy. So then that causes a problem, because when you're adopting from China, either you have to be single or you have to be married for 2 years. So she can't, like, she doesn't want to just quit with her adoption journey, but then she also really likes this guy. And so I thought there was a lot of good points in the book, and I connected to like the friendship and the love story. I felt like it wasn't crazy, although there were a lot of just kind of silly like romantic moments, but I thought it was pretty well written. The problem that I had with it though is just like that practical and theological thought of, should a single woman be adopting a child? And she even brings up that fact in the book, and she thinks about, is that even kind for me to take this child and put it in a family that is not a complete family? There is no father, and which is so important in a child's life, but then she decides to go through with it anyways. I think personally, I think that she should have gotten married first and then she could have adopted later. But I felt like this book did a really good job of just showing her emotions and the thought process. I wish it would have talked more about her church. But overall, if you're looking for a Christian book that has some adoption in it, I think this is a good book to read. And, another thing that was interesting about it is that she's a public school teacher. and I definitely don't like public school. So that was a little hard to be able to like relate to what she was doing, but I thought it was a sweet story and both the characters were pretty great. And then the last book was another one I listened to, The Most Dangerous Man, Daniel Ellsberg and the Secret History of the Vietnam War. This is another one by Steve Shankin, and I didn't love this one as much as Fallout. I'm not sure where I would put it in my ranking of his books, but this one was so interesting too. It's about, the Pentagon Papers and the Vietnam War. I didn't realize until about 3/4 of the way through that it's basically the same story as the movie The Post that had Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep in it, I think. And that's from like a different perspective. That's from the Post perspective, and this is from Daniel Ellsberg, the guy who released the Pentagon Papers, or stole them basically. So different perspective, but same storyline. And I thought this one was so interesting, learning about the different presidents who were presidents during this time, how much cover-up was going on in the Vietnam War, just the fact that we don't even know today, 50, 60 years later, we don't even know what went on in the Vietnam War. There's so many secrets. And the fact that the government was purposely hiding secrets. Some of the presidents were purposely prolonging the war, just so that they would win the election. Just so many crazy things that were going on, and all the things that were happening to silence this man Daniel Ellsberg, which then leads to the Watergate scandal, which I didn't have a very good understanding of before I read this book, and just seeing how it all started with this one guy who stole the papers, and then Nixon tried to silence him, and then it was just kind of like a snowball effect. He had already done one kind of not the best thing, and then it just led to doing more and more shady, under the rug kind of things while he was president of the United States. I thought it was just so interesting. I definitely have a bad opinion of Johnson after reading it. There's language in this book, but most of it honestly came from Johnson. He was a pretty angry man. But I feel like I learned so much about history, and like all of this author's other books that I read, I want to get it in paper so that I can read it again and just really absorb all of this history. If you haven't noticed, I really like history and love reading books that talk about history. So again, if you want to learn about Vietnam War kind of history, and you're looking for a book that is nonfiction but actually really interesting, I would highly recommend this book and all the other books by him, because he does a really good job of telling the story. So those are the 8 books that I read last month, and I'm kind of surprised by what I read, and let me know down in the comments if you like any of these books that I've read, or maybe what your favorite book was last month. I would love to know and chat with you guys down in the comments. I will see you hopefully next week. Bye!